En España hay 5 millones de personas que no pueden calentar sus hogares o a los que les cuesta mucho hacerlo. Así lo han calculado en sus estudios varias ONGs. Para luchar contra la pobreza energética, la Generalitat de Cataluña prohibió que se cortara el suministro eléctrico durante los meses de invierno, pero el gobierno recurrió al Tribunal Constitucional por invadir sus competencias y este le dio la razón. Mientras tanto, muchas personas necesitadas siguen dependiendo de las linternas y las velas para poder iluminar sus hogares.
Hoy este gesto es 14 euros más caro que en el mes de abril.
Hemos sufrido un incremento de en torno al 25% en 6 meses y ahora de golpe, en la primera quincena de noviembre, otros 2 euros más.
En los 9 primeros meses del año, las 3 grandes eléctricas han ganado 4.277 millones.
What's going on with all of this talk about agreements in Paris, the temperatures going up? It seems like we're getting to a moment where there's overload in the mainstream media. Why is that, Ed?
What we're dealing with here is a lie. It's not happening, at least not in the way that they're talking about it. If it's happening at all, which is even questionable, but if it is, it's certainly not man-made. Not too long ago, all the news items and all the TV programs were about the global cooling and get ready for the big ice age and everything. Well, that didn't happen, and now they started to tell us about global warming, and that didn't happen really, although they kept telling you it was happening. That became so embarrassing for these people that they had to change their name from global warming. They said, let's not call it warming anymore because that doesn't work. People are saying it's not warming. Let's call it climate change. Well, that's a little easier to handle because the climate is always changing. So what's wrong with this climate change? Well, they want to have us believe that climate change means that it's getting worse, that the hurricanes are getting worse, and the storms are getting worse, and the droughts are getting longer, and all of this sorts of things. The data does not support any of that. It's a lie, lie, lie from top to bottom. If people can be scared out of their wits that the planet is going to come to some kind of a horrible end, that the islands are all going to sink, the coastlines are going to be lowered, the cities will be inundated with water, there will be drought, and we're all going to starve, we're all going to die of thirst, all of these horrible things, they will be softened up and they'll be conditioned to accept all these draconian solutions supposedly being offered by the same people that have created the myth, that are telling the lies. Their solution for all of this, if you happen to notice, is all the same. more government, more taxes, more regulations and controls over you bad people who have this big bad carbon footprint. We're going to control you because you see you're the problem. Your lifestyle is too high. And that's really the story. All of these politicians and all the people with their hand in the public till making a huge profit over this global warming or climate change industry that has been created out of this. It's all about their profit and their control over human beings. And that is the motive. That is what's behind the lie. They're reaching for total global control over the economy and over the personal lives of every human being on this planet. And this lie or the scare tactic of global warming is one of the most convenient excuses they have for conditioning people to accept it and think that it's all in their own best interest. That's what it's all about. It's all about psychology. If you can conquer the mind and convince people that black is white and white is purple, if you can convince them that the planet is heating up, for example, and we're coming to the end of the line for our children and our grandchildren, you make them feel guilty. You make them feel that by cooperating with the system and doing exactly what you're told, somehow you now have become a better person.
Do you worry, Ed, that we might be approaching a time when the lunatics currently, in control of the ship might say, I'll tell you what, it's about time that we make it illegal to deny this, or that we severely punish people for doing it? What do you think?
Well, we're already there. No textbooks would be allowed into the school system. In fact, the next step is you won't even be able to discuss it in a classroom. If any teacher brings up the topic of questioning global warming, they will lose their job and possibly could go to jail. It's already happening now. The new warfare is the warfare for perceptions. It's what you perceive to be true. That's you act on your perceptions. So we all do that. We always will, always have. The only question is the perceptions have to be based on something. If they're based on myths, we're in trouble. If our perceptions are based on truth, then we have a better chance at doing the right thing while we're here on this planet.
The climate has been constantly changing since the Earth was formed 4.6 billion years ago. So then what about carbon dioxide, the great villain of the global warming alarmists? Where does that fit into this picture? Not as neatly as you might think. Temperatures and carbon dioxide levels do not show a strong correlation. In fact, over very long time spans, periods of hundreds of millions of years, they are often completely out of sync with one another. But we do know there are many more factors in play than simply the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. Factors such as the shape and size of the Earth's elliptical orbit around the Sun, activity from the Sun, and the amount of wobble or tilt in the Earth's axis, among many others. Contrary to media headlines, the trend over the past couple of decades has been essentially flat. Meanwhile, human-caused CO2 emissions are higher than ever. About 25% of all the CO2 emissions from human sources have occurred during this period of no net warming. So what are we in for next? Will the temperature resume an upward trend? Will it remain flat for a lengthy period? Or will it begin to drop? No one knows, not even the biggest, fastest computers. Predicting the climate, one of the most complex systems on Earth, with thousands of inputs, many of which we don't understand, isn't an exact science or anything close to it. Maybe it's just a tad arrogant to suggest that we can predict the weather or the climate or just about anything 60 years from now. The science is not settled. The debate is not over. The climate is always changing, it always has, and it always will.
In terms of the demonization of the Syrian army and government, this is all part of the process of trying to convince the Western public to back, Western administrations in supporting groups like the White Helmets, which pretend to be Syrian rescuers, but which have received over $20 million from the U.S., $20 million from the UK, and $60 million, together from various EU states. And what they're essentially doing, these White Helmets, and I really want to stress this point because it's part of the overall scheme of propaganda and demonization. They're White Helmets by day and terrorists by night. You see many of these people that are dressed in their pristine white outfits and white helmets that pretend to be rescuing civilians. In other instances, you see the same characters holding their weapons and posing as rebels. These have been well documented by various authors, including my colleague Vanessa Beeley. And, this is the scandalous hypocrisy of the West. Not only has the West been funding and training and arming terrorists to go into Syria and to behead and slaughter Syrian civilians, but now the West wants to award the White Helmets with the Nobel Peace Prize. And this, again, is a group of terrorists that operate solely in terrorist districts of Idlib and eastern Aleppo. And they have been known to pose with the dead bodies of Syrian soldiers. They are not neutral, they are not impartial, but they are surely a tool of propaganda and regime change. Back to the bigger picture is not about Syrian security, because if it was, then the West and the Gulf, let's just stick with the West, would have to respect the fact that the Syrian people have chosen their government. Even if they want political change in the future, right now they want the current government they have, they want security, they want an end to the West and Gulf and Israel and Turkey sending terrorists in to murder them. They want stability, they want an end of the sanctions that is suffocating them. And they don't want Western intervention, and they above all do not want a no-fly zone. And if you watch corporate media now, you'll see that this is what the White Helmets are calling for. This is what so-called unarmed civilians, unnamed activists in eastern Aleppo are calling for. And we've seen what a no-fly zone does to countries. When they no-fly zoned Libya, it was the beginning of the end of Libya, and Syrians do not want that. Aside from that, I've been to Aleppo twice. I've spoken with the Aleppo Medical Association, which was established back in 1959. So it's not one of these new organizations that's solely operating for propaganda purposes. And they have told me they have over 4,160 registered doctors, including 800 specialists. So bear in mind, when you read in the corporate media, last pediatrician, last doctor in Aleppo, this is a scam. This is designed to make you think that the Syrian government is killing people. Yes, there are strikes on eastern Aleppo because it is a hotbed of terrorism. And again, if viewers would think, what would America do if there was an act of terrorism in a state of America? You can bet that police, security forces, special forces would surround that area and eliminate the terrorism. So please don't be hypocritical when you look at the situation in Syria, where there is terrorism, and when actually the Syrian government and army are dealing with it in the most humane way possible, in that they've opened corridors, humanitarian corridors, to enable civilians to flee. And when they do flee to western Aleppo, they're given health care and emergency services and shelter. However, on many instances when they try to flee, they're gunned down by the terrorists that are preventing them from fleeing. So really there's a lot of propaganda that people maybe aren't aware that is going on in Aleppo, but it's not the black and white picture that the Syrians and the Russians are slaughtering civilians. It's the opposite. But you have to look to find this information.
Desde el Centro de Reconciliación de Rusia para Siria se destaca sobre todo la idea de que este ataque fue perpetrado de manera intencionada, ya que los responsables conocían perfectamente las coordenadas y la localización de esta infraestructura sanitaria rusa.
La sangre de nuestros militares está en las manos de los que encargaron este asesinato, de los que crearon, formaron y armaron a esas bestias con aspecto humano, llamándoles oposición para justificarse ante su conciencia y ante los electores. Sí, sí, señores patrocinadores de terroristas de Estados Unidos, Reino Unido, Francia y otros países y formaciones simpatizantes.
Now, the big question is, will Donald Trump have more control of his own team? Or, on the other hand, will, for example, James Mattis, the Defense Secretary, will he play the same role as Ashton Carter? Will he be, more favorable of arming the rebels? Now, James Mattis, contrary to Ashton Carter, is a military man, and he knows very well, what terrorist groups mean. He participated in the fight in Fallujah. He knows how evil these people are, these terrorist groups. So he might not be like Carter. He might be more welcoming, in addition to other members of the administration. That being said, however, James Mattis is considered to be very hostile towards Iran. Many other people in Trump's administration, like Vice President Pence, Pence is very close to Israel as well. And Israel doesn't want, Iran and Hezbollah to come out on top, and they don't want also the Syrian president to achieve victory. Avigdor Lieberman even made these statements very clearly. So I think you have to watch out about, this Trump's team and how Israel might sway them. Will Israel also have a certain influence and maybe prevent them from collaborating with the Russians?
tendency is to correct for the, I won't call them elites, I'll call them patriarchs, these boring old patriarchs, David Rockefeller, George Bush Sr., I don't know, someone would include George Soros in there. The ones who think that America is their property to do with as they please, to make their world one world order, globalized nightmare. And they were losing in every part of the world over the last 8 years with the Obama soft cop strategy, as it started out to be, the peace president, the president of change, and so on. But the result of the Obama policy didn't have the effect of crippling Putin's Russia and bringing it to its knees with the sanctions and everything. It had the effect of strengthening Russia by having Russia go to the east, go toward China in a deeper way than ever before in Russian history. Look at a map of Eurasia, you're creating what I call a golden triangle, because you're linking Tehran, the capital of Iran, with Beijing, the capital of China, with Moscow, the capital of the Russian Federation, and creating, with the infrastructure of these railroads, you're creating, for the first time in history, an interlinked economic space that has more population, that has more highly skilled manpower, that has more scientific and industrial engineers and technicians than any place on the planet, including the United States, including Western Europe. So these patriarchs, if they look at a geopolitical map of their power, they're losing it everywhere. Something had to change. So the change, the so-called Plan D, as I call it, is called Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an actor. He's a television actor, Showtime. He's got the energy to rally Americans for war in maybe 2-3 years, maybe less. Let's see.
The script is brilliant. They know exactly what the mood of the public is, what Americans are upset about, the loss of jobs to China. The fact that he has zero political experience is beautiful for the people behind him, because then he's dependent on who they give him. Trump's job is to prepare for a war. Russian shoestring budget operation in Syria since September of last year was a wake-up call to the United States oligarchy, let's call them, that they're not ready for that war. They're not ready to challenge Russia to the breaking point again. That's his program. That's what he's been given to do. He will rebuild the resources of the United States to make such a war. That may take 2, 3, 4 years. And in the meantime, people may think, oh, finally we're, coming to better times with the economy again, jobs in the defense industry at least. But in the end, Donald Trump is not about to roll back the military-industrial complex of the United States, far from it. Donald Trump is not about to make peace with the rest of the world and stop interfering in their internal affairs with color revolutions and so forth, far from it.
Wenn man Amerika betrachtet, dann wird in Amerika die Politik seit 1913 von der Federal Reserve, also von der US-Zentralbank bestimmt. Alle Regierungen seit 1913 sind nichts anderes als Exekutivorgane der großen Banken und inzwischen auch der großen Hedgefonds an der Wall Street. Und es gibt natürlich innerhalb dieser Großbanken und innerhalb der Hedgefonds, innerhalb der Finanzelite der USA verschiedene Strategien. Die eine Strategie hat Hillary Clinton verfolgt und diese Strategie bedeutete eine Verschärfung des Konfliktes mit Russland. Und die andere Strategie ist eine Strategie, die von Zbigniew Brzezinski entworfen wurde. Und diese Strategie verfolgt das Ziel, mit Russland einen etwas harmonischeren Kurs zu fahren. Aber das bedeutet noch lange nicht, dass die USA deswegen gegenüber dem Rest der Welt friedlicher werden. Zbigniew Brzezinski hat dafür plädiert, dass es eine New Realignment zwischen den USA und Russland geben soll. Das heißt, dass man die Kriegsvorbereitungen gegen Russland etwas zurückfährt und nicht mehr ganz so aggressiv gegenüber Russland auftritt. Aber ich weiß nicht, inwiefern das sehr lange anhalten wird, weil wenn man jetzt sieht, wen Trump in sein Team befördert, da sind schon einige Leute, die in der Vergangenheit sehr hart gegen Russland vorgegangen sind. Und man muss sehen, die Wall Street und die USA sind in riesigen ökonomischen Schwierigkeiten. Und die haben in der Ukraine ein Regime ersetzt durch ein US-höriges Regime. Und eines der Ziele der Wall Street wäre es, das Regime in Russland, also das Regime Putin, abzusetzen und dort jemanden einzusetzen wie Jazenjuk. Das würde den USA sehr gut passen. Nur ich denke, dass jetzt unter Trump erstmal dieser Konflikt mit Russland etwas zurückgefahren wird, dafür aber der Konflikt im Nahen Osten weiter vorangetrieben wird. Donald Trump ist auch nur eine Marionette. In Wirklichkeit wird die Politik entschieden von den Zentralbanken, also von der Federal Reserve in den USA und von der EZB in Europa. Und was immer diese Leute entscheiden, wird dann von der Politik anschließend umgesetzt.
This is the center of an empire whose power is represented in this extraordinary world map of American military bases. 4,000 bases in the United States, almost 1,000 bases spread across every continent.
The bases that we have around the world, hidden in plain sight, are the real territory of our empire. But at the same time, we maintain independent governments in Japan or South Korea or Germany. They don't have autonomy when it comes to foreign policy. So it's a very sophisticated and effective system. And the beauty of this system is that most people pay no attention to it at all. They think it's just a natural occurrence to have 50,000 American troops in Japan.
Many of these bases have been set up to combat China's worldwide economic influence. From these bases, the United States operates a secret army in 147 countries.
The winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, President Barack Obama, has committed to trillions of dollars to our nuclear arsenal. He's committing trillions of future dollars to war in space. And we need an enemy for all this money, and China's the perfect enemy.
You've written that airstrikes and naval blockades have a role to play in punishing China. You've described the need for sea mines. You've described the need for special forces, US special forces, and missiles placed in islands. This sounds like a preparation for war.
What the United States is doing, again, is responding to provocative behavior on the part of China. And just as we did in the Cold War, the idea was to have a position of military strength such that your adversaries were not tempted to act in aggressive ways or try and employ coercion to get their way.
In 2015, the US Navy rehearsed a blockade that would cut China's lifelines of oil and trade and raw materials. The danger of confrontation grows by the day.
Our operations and our presence, first of all, is warmly welcomed by the vast majority of the coastal states. But secondly, is fully accepted by the Chinese.
Excuse me, is it fully accepted?
Chinese
My impression
leaders,
is that they're scared. And this is what they're scared of. A noose of bases right around China. Missiles, bombers, drones, warships. A provocation of war.
The United States has gotten into a situation where there's a lot of military, saber rattling, and it's really being orchestrated from the top.
Where are we going to stop this process before it starts a war? And then if the war starts, where does that end?
To show the whole world that America is back, bigger and better and stronger than ever before. We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing. It's the greatest theft in the history of the world.
The new president, Donald Trump, has a problem with China. The urgent question now is, will Trump continue with the provocations revealed in this film and take us all to the edge of war?
De manifestantes chocó con la policía en Brasilia el martes, luego de que el Senado brasileño aprobó una reforma que congela el gasto público por 20 años. La enmienda implica que a partir de 2017 el presupuesto solo se podrá aumentar conforme a la inflación. La iniciativa es parte de las impopulares medidas de austeridad del presidente Michel Temer. Los inconformes afirman que la iniciativa perjudicará aún más a los servicios de salud y la educación. Alegan además que el conservador Temer, que accedió a la presidencia tras la destitución de Dilma Rousseff, no tiene la legitimidad de las urnas para llevar adelante sus reformas.
esta noticia ha impactado a la comunidad internacional, pero existe una gran parte de la población que opinan que Fidel Castro no murió esta semana, sino que más bien este líder político llevaba muerto hace varios años y que sus apariciones públicas eran una farsa para mantener el control de su país. Cuando Fidel Castro abandonó el poder en el 2006, comenzaron a surgir rumores que esto se debía no solamente a su poca salud o condición física, sino que algunos detractores afirmaban que Fidel Castro realmente había muerto y que la persona que a veces salía en público era simplemente un doble, puesto en ese lugar para que el país de Cuba se mantuviera en calma. Como sabemos, muchos de los mandatarios en el mundo suelen utilizar dobles para confundir a sus enemigos y evitar ser asesinados. ¿No sería ilógico el pensar que Fidel Castro contrataría a personas para ser sus dobles, pues intentó más de 600 veces asesinarlo?
Usted habla de una forma con extraordinario detalle sobre los lujos de Fidel Castro y habla de Cayo Piedra. ¿Qué es Cayo Piedra para la gente que no sabe?
Bueno, Cayo Piedra, Fidel lo descubre en el año 1961 después de la bahía de la invasión de Bahía de Cochino. Él da un recorrido por la zona, es un cayo que está al sur de la Ciénaga de Zapata. No es un cayo, más bien son dos cayos unidos por un puente que tiene más de 120 metros de largo. Y él se enamora de esos dos cayos, pero después se le hicieron muchas modificaciones. Hay una casa de visita con piscina, con poseta de agua salada, hay un delfinario donde tiene delfines para hacer acrobacia, criadero de quelonios, etcétera.
En el 2006 la revista Forbes incluyó a Fidel Castro en la lista de los 10 reyes, reinas y dictadores más ricos del mundo. ¿Cómo hizo dinero Fidel?
Desde los años 1980 él crea toda una serie de empresas y estas empresas, las utilidades se le entregaban directamente a Fidel Castro. De esa fortuna, de esa reserva, donde no solo había dinero, sino también había bienes, había autos, camiones, etcétera, que él podía disponer de ellos sin darle cuenta a nadie ni rendirle cuenta a nadie. Y yo sé que en una ocasión él le prestó al propio gobierno cubano $10 millones al 10% de intereses. Y hubo una conversación entre el ministro de Interior y Fidel a través de unos audífonos.
¿O sea, Abrantes?
Ajá, Abrantes. A través de unos audífonos que están los micrófonos dentro del despacho de Fidel, que Abrantes le estaba rindiendo cuenta a Fidel sobre la droga.
Quiere decir que Fidel Castro estaba involucrado en el negocio de la droga.
Exacto. Yo hasta ese momento creía ciegamente Fidel. Para mí Fidel era lo más grande que existía. En ese momento a mí todo eso se me desbarató. En primer lugar me sentí utilizado y me sentí engañado. Fidel en ese momento públicamente se caía de espalda diciendo que el gobierno cubano no tenía nada que ver con la droga y que esa era una maniobra del imperialismo. Y yo había comprobado que era Fidel el que estaba dirigiendo el narcotráfico.
Se le asigna también ser agente
jesuítico. Pues bueno, se alineó incluso con Allende para las conversaciones entre marxismo y cristianismo, pero también se le asigna mucha relación con lo judío. Esto viene de su relación pues para empezar, con Rockefeller. Entonces, además ha sido recibido como el número 1, te dice el récord Guinness también, dentro de ser recibido por Rockefeller y por el CFR. Y ha sido alabado por un hijo de Rockefeller múltiples veces, diciendo que estaba haciendo muy buena labor en Cuba, aunque a la vez Rockefeller forma parte de los que están en contra de Cuba, ¿no? Entonces esto es como un sinsentido. Empezó ya siendo estudiante, acabando con la vida de los rivales políticos, y esto lo dice gente muy cercana a él. El Che Guevara, eso parece que hay pocas dudas, porque la persona que detuvo, que era un agente también doble, en Bolivia, al Che, y que lo mataron en un día, no esperaron mucho más, Che era más tendente hacia lo chino, hacia el comunismo chino, que hacia, esto lo dice también Raúl Castro, que hacia el comunismo de la URSS. Entonces esto, bueno, pues era un inconveniente, aparte que Castro parece que no le gustaba mucho que alguien brillara a su lado, y el Che sabemos todos que brilló mucho.
That the CIA, which has shown a great ability in assassinating leaders all around the world, proved to be so inept in its alleged attempts at assassinating Fidel Castro. How can we explain the love between the most reactionary institution in the Western Hemisphere and the alleged most revolutionary leader of the continent? Though the Council on Foreign Relations describes itself as a nonpartisan organization, whose only goal is to promote international exchanges to reach a better understanding among countries, the reality is quite different. The CFR is actually an intelligence and espionage agency, like the KGB, the CIA, the Mossad, and the MI6, and operates like them. A new agent they recruited in early 1948 played a cardinal role. This secret agent was sent to Bogota, Colombia, on a secret mission. Once there, acting as an agent provocateur, he coordinated the assassination of Colombian populist leader Jorge Eliezer Gaitan.
This new secret agent the conspirators had recruited was a young Cuban university student named
Fidel Castro. His first mission consisted in traveling to Bogota, Colombia, planting false evidence and creating false clues implicating the communists in the assassination of Gaitan and the Bogotazo riots. He was very successful. The Bogotazo PSYOP marked the beginning of the Cold War in the Western Hemisphere. It was effectively used by the CFR conspirators to plant the fear of communism in the minds of the American and Latin American people. The fear of communism became an excellent cover for the CFR conspirators to hide their true activities of exploitation and control. Since then, Fidel Castro has never stopped working for his CFR masters. As a way of payment for his important services, Castro's CFR masters have allowed him to continue working unmolested in the systematic destruction of Cuba and its people. In the process, growing his numbered accounts in Zurich.
The mysterious explosion of the French freighter La Coubre in Havana Harbor, the Bay of Pigs invasion, the guerrilla wars in Latin America, the invasion of Angola, the death of Che Guevara, and the assassination of Presidents John F. Kennedy and Salvador Allende, the shutdown by Castro's mix of 2 American civilian planes, just to mention a few, were CFR, CIA, Castro joint operations planned by the CFR conspirators.
Moreover, everything seems to indicate that the flooding of the U.S. with drugs from South America has also been a joint CFR-CIA Castro operation, a sort of opium war planned by the CFR conspirators to destroy the moral fiber of the U.S. as a way to facilitate the establishing of a totalitarian regime in America.
In the same fashion, and despite its anti-Castro rhetoric, the U.S. government, both under Republican and Democrat administrations, always ends up helping Castro. The U.S. embargo on Cuba is perhaps the most obvious example. Far from damaging Castro, the totally ineffective embargo has given Castro the best excuse to justify his systematic destruction of the Cuban economy, its culture, and its people.
Mars issue is something which, of course, challenges those basically holding the purse strings on the drip feed of technology to us. You know, like the fact that we're running around with iPads now, we think is glorious, whatever. But I'm sorry, these are obsolete technologies which have been invented and are probably 50 years behind the state of the art. But we think they're great because we've been dumbed down to believe that they're great, you know. But I mean, a lot of people don't even know about things like the chronovisor and time travel. They don't want to accept it because they've been educated to believe that time travel is not possible. We have to stop thinking, I think, in terms of black and white and think in time, linear time. Time is not linear. On the one hand, okay, you can imagine that UFOs might exist. It's a big universe after all. But time travel and other bases and a breakaway civilization, that to me, that is more logical than anything. Yes, there is amazing technology out there. Yes, we have some brothers and sisters out there in the universe which it's our right and destiny to connect with. There's a multitude of parallel universes, and the universe that we are destined to inherit is already within the field for us to move to, and helping to push disclosure to another level.
Yeah, and the $3 trillion program of U.S. bases on Mars. I mean, if you got a $3 trillion program, you got to disclose it, right? The infrastructure, the technology, the mission, the purposes. You know, we know at least 25 to 50 people who have been there and back. Michael Ralph spent 20 years there as part of the permanent security staff. He could provide a complete list of the VIPs. And the next level is social change. You know, all these famous people have gone there. Some witnesses are saying that up to 60 million people have been taken under false pretenses to Mars and other industrial facilities in the solar system. It's extraordinary to try and hide a secret that your nearest planetary neighbor is inhabited by Earthians and by Martian humans. This is a matter of some urgency from an evolution point of view. Let's say that we're trying to open up a dialogue with our fellow neighborhood planet that has our genetic cousins, and where one of our governments has opened up, has a 40, 50-year project. And so you're dealing probably with this being a draconian planet and it being draconian policy that Earth humans and Mars humans are kept apart.
If you're prepared to accept that that's going on, you're prepared to accept that out of those hundreds of thousands of sightings, some of them are bound to make mistakes or crash or be shot down or whatever, and there is reverse engineering going on, then you have to accept the fact that somebody's doing the reverse engineering. And out of those people doing that reverse engineering, they're not disclosing it to the rest of us. They're actually using the technology and the findings from that technology to gain an advantage. Well, you ever notice that the majority of films involving extraterrestrials are always negative? You know, they're always coming here, of course, to destroy us.
Yeah.
Right? Always coming to attack. They're always coming because they need something, they want to take something. But I'm a firm believer that we need to release the technology which is indeed available, which is being used on the Martian colonies, which is being used by the breakaway civilization. And if it is, we wouldn't have these problems. You know, we wouldn't have wars, we wouldn't have these divisions, borders between countries. And so all the politicians out there like Merkel or Obama and all these people, they're all part of that massive, disinformation group out there, which is keeping us under an existing system that has limited, political means, that has limited infrastructure, that has, limited resources. Just let it continue their warfare. And I think we need to learn how do you get through it. And the way to get through it is to listen to your heart, and yet resonate with how your heart feels. Because you can always tell somebody who's really genuinely wanting to change things for positive. They have this love for humanity. They have this love for Gaia, for Mother Earth, or whatever you want to call it. That's the way to get to the truth.
dans l'univers, tout est dual. Alors les particules sont toutes duales, c'est-à-dire corpusculaires et ondulatoires. Nous sommes un assemblage de particules. Nous avons des énergies de pensée. Notre temps est une succession de temps perceptibles séparés par des temps imperceptibles. Ces temps imperceptibles, imaginez que vous puissiez les utiliser avec une autre observation, un autre temps d'observation. Alors là, on rentre dans un principe physique connu, qui est le principe d'Heisenberg, à savoir que dans un temps nul, je peux bénéficier d'une énergie infinie. On le sait pour les particules, ça pourrait s'étendre à l'observateur que nous sommes. Regardez une chose, c'est que cette loi du dédoublement des temps était enseignée du temps de Platon. Par exemple, vous avez une phrase célèbre de Platon. Il faut être celui qui est, celui qui était, celui qui sera, pour être celui qui est. Alors, vous voyez bien qu'il y a 3 temps. 3 temps, être celui qui était, celui qui est, celui qui sera. Mais dites vrai, vous êtes dans les 3 temps en même temps. C'est-à-dire que être dans le passé, être dans le futur, c'est être en même temps dans le présent. Vous voyez que cette notion de passé, présent, futur, c'est une histoire de mémoire. En fait, la mémoire que vous avez, c'est toujours la mémoire d'un futur possible, que vous avez fabriqué. Comment ? Par une pensée. Comment je peux aller d'un temps perceptible dans un temps imperceptible ? Il y a une autre loi physique qui est le principe de Langevin. C'est que si je vais à une vitesse proche de la vitesse de la lumière, je ne vieillis pas de la même façon que celui qui reste immobile. Donc la différence de vitesse crée une différence de temps. Or, nous avons, nous, un corps dual, c'est-à-dire que nous avons un corps physique que nous connaissons, un corps énergétique qui dédouble ce corps physique, qui en fait informe ce corps physique, et c'est lui qui va chercher l'information. Et cette information, il peut aller la chercher à une vitesse super lumineuse. Maintenant, c'est admis en science, les vitesses d'intrication, les vitesses super lumineuses. Et allant chercher l'information dans un temps complètement différent, il peut prendre le temps de connaître des tas de choses. Il revient en moi. Ce corps énergétique, c'est moi, hein, c'est pas un double, hein, c'est moi, et donne à mon corps physique toutes les informations nécessaires que je décode, moi, ici, dans ma vie, et ça me pousse à faire des tas de choses. Donc je vais d'une réalité dans une autre réalité temporelle. Le problème, c'est que chaque fois que je pense quelque chose, je fabrique ce potentiel. Ce potentiel, je ne suis pas obligé de le vivre, mais il appartient à tout le monde. C'est-à-dire qu'en fait, je peux fabriquer des potentiels pour n'importe qui. Et je deviens responsable de celui qui va utiliser mon potentiel pour vivre. Donc vous voyez qu'il y a une loi physique très très importante. Je dis bien une loi physique très importante. Ne pense pas à faire à autrui ce que tu ne voudrais pas qu'autrui pense à te faire. Puisque tu fabriques un potentiel désagréable, si quelqu'un prend ce potentiel, il va avoir une vie désagréable et c'est toi qui en es responsable. Si vous fabriquez un futur dangereux, vous fabriquez quoi ? Par exemple, fabriquer de la violence. J'apprends à tuer en jeu vidéo. Je fabrique le meurtre dans le futur. Et puis après, il y a quelqu'un qui actualise ça dans sa vie, il va tuer. Et vous dites, c'est un meurtrier. Et vous, avec votre jeu vidéo, qu'est-ce que vous avez fait ? Vous avez fabriqué le futur. Si vous ne l'aviez pas fabriqué, il n'aurait pas pu l'utiliser. Car si ça se trouve, il n'y avait pas pensé avant. Donc c'est votre pensée qui a entraîné ce potentiel, qui a fait que quelqu'un l'utilise. Dans ce système de dédoublement, quand vous venez vous incarner sur Terre, la naissance, c'est une mort dans un autre temps. Et quand vous allez mourir, c'est une naissance dans cet autre temps. En fait, vous vivez dans une ouverture temporelle de vous-même. Il faut apprendre à fabriquer un futur sans avoir de responsabilité dans ce futur vis-à-vis des autres. Notre but sur Terre est de n'avoir aucune responsabilité dans ce futur, de façon que les gens qui vivent sur Terre aient la meilleure vie possible. Le futur est à la mesure de pensée de l'humanité. Regardez ce que l'homme pense, c'est son futur. Si vous pensez de travers, vous fabriquez un potentiel de travers que vous pourrez utiliser. Si vous pensez des choses valables, que n'importe qui peut utiliser sans problème, alors vous pensez à faire à autrui, ce que vous aimeriez qu'autrui pense à vous faire. Et de ce fait, vous n'avez aucune responsabilité dans la vie des gens, dans le malheur des gens. Par contre, vous avez peut-être une responsabilité dans le bonheur des gens, si ce que vous fabriquez permet de mieux vivre.